Can you have too much money in a Roth account? Today we'll cover 4 reasons why the answer might be yes. So Roth accounts are one of the most exciting and I think useful investment tools available out there. By allowing investors to make contributions on an after-tax basis and then have the earnings and withdrawals within Roth accounts to be made completely tax-free, Uncle Sam basically gives us the option to have at least some portion of our assets that are completely tax-free for the rest of our lives. And while the merits of using Roth accounts versus traditional accounts may be debatable depending on your income now versus when you retire, what isn't debatable is that most people, if not all, prefer having money that's completely sheltered from tax over money that isn't.
I know that's right.
So with that in mind, wouldn't it be ideal if you had as much money as you could possibly get, maybe even all of your money into a Roth type account, so that you wouldn't have any tax liability on that ever again? On the surface, you might think so, but today we'll go over 4 reasons why that may not be the case. All right, scenario number 1 is if you're a giver. Now, if you have plans to donate money to charity even as you reach retirement age, then Roth accounts are not going to be the efficient place to do that from. There's a couple reasons for that. First off, if you make a donation from a Roth account, then you're making a donation of after-tax dollars, or dollars that don't have any future tax implication tied to them whatsoever. So you're kind of foregoing a deduction that you could make if you made a donation from another account. The other is if all of your money is coming out of a Roth for your living expenses, then you don't have any earned income to make a deduction for a gift. So you can't deduct taxable income from a tax return with no income on it. And if all you have is a Roth account to pull income from, then your gifts and donations won't be deductible at all. So there are a couple ways to avoid this. The first and most logical is just don't convert everything you have into a Roth account. That way you'll have taxable buckets of money from which you can make donations. Then when you're actually doing your taxes for the income you realize or the amounts of money that you pull from those accounts, you can take the deduction from your donation then. Another more complicated option is a donor advised fund, which is basically an opportunity for you to set aside a large portion of your assets and contribute it to a charity. Usually it's actually held by an investment company, but you set up the fund, you fund it with whatever money you want to fund it with. You receive a deduction for the full amount of money that you put into the donor advised fund, up to 30% I think for non-cash assets and 60% for cash of your total income for the year. Then you can distribute money out of that donor advised fund to the charity of your choice by basically directing the investment company that's holding the donor advised fund to do so as you wish. Now, the money in a donor advised fund is actually invested per your instructions as it sits in the fund, so it actually has the opportunity to grow to benefit whatever charities you want to donate it to while it's actually sitting there. The key thing to remember about a donor advised fund, though, is that it's irrevocable. Once you put the money into a donor advised fund, it's not yours anymore. So you can't retract it or pull it back if you decide you need that money later. The second reason you may not want all of your money in a Roth is for inheritance. Now, before we dive into this, I first want to explain that I think Roth accounts are really the best way to receive an inheritance. Emphasis is on receive there. And the reason that is because if you receive a Roth IRA as an inheritance, basically you have up to 10 years to liquidate the account. But in that 10-year window, the assets that are in the Roth account can continue to be invested and continue to grow. So basically it's like having an extra Roth for 10 years if you inherit the account. And then when you liquidate the assets in the account, they're still completely tax-free. However, just because a Roth is the best way to receive an inheritance, it doesn't mean it's the most tax-efficient way to give an inheritance. Imagine for a minute you're retired and you're working hard on converting every dollar you have from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. And your goal is basically to benefit your children when they receive the inheritance as much as possible. You want them to receive it completely tax-free. Let's also assume that you're in the 22% tax bracket. So let's say every $100,000 that you convert, you're paying $22,000 in tax for that conversion, leaving $78,000 in the Roth account to grow completely tax-free. But let's assume for a second your kids are in the 12% tax bracket, and that $100,000 that was in a traditional IRA, let's assume they would have inherited it instead of the Roth. Well, they would inherit $88,000 instead of $78,000 because whenever they liquidate that traditional IRA, they're going to only pay 12% tax, or 12% of the $100,000 that was in there, meaning you sacrificed $10,000 in taxes that you didn't have to. On the other hand, you could look at your kids' income tax brackets at some point and say, oh, well, they're at 12%, so we shouldn't convert. And then later they get their PhD or something, and their income their marginal income tax rate goes up to the 32 or 35 or 37% bracket. Now the Roth would have made perfect sense, but you didn't do conversions because you thought they'd been a lower one. It's hard to hit a moving target, but that's another compelling reason not to convert everything into a Roth and sort of leave, I guess, some diversification so you can make a decision on what's best given circumstances at a given point in time. You know, truthfully, when it comes to estates, you need to remember that it's your estate, okay? Use the money as you need it until you're gone. I know there's a lot of good intentions out there for children and things, but the fact of the matter is one of the best gifts you can give your kids is to not move into their basement. Make sure you have enough money to care for yourself. They'll worry about the inheritance later. Just be a little selfish. It is your money. By the way, if the information in this video is helpful to you at all, please show your appreciation by clicking like and subscribe below. That helps our channel to grow and it'll allow me to keep making videos and educate people about personal finance. Reason number 3 not to have everything in a Roth is that you'll probably get sick one day. Now currently the tax code allows you to deduct about 7.5% of your adjusted gross income each year for medical expenses, but you can't claim that deduction if you don't have any taxable income to report. The most recent estimate I've seen concluded that the average person can expect to spend about $315,000 on medical expenses between the time they turn age 65 and the time that they die. Even if you only spend about half that amount, a 7.5% tax deduction would be pretty valuable. Now another option is you could set up an HSA or health savings account, which basically allows for tax-free contributions, tax-free earnings, and tax-free withdrawals. Assume that the money is used for a qualified medical expense. You know, having those 3 tax options actually potentially could save you even more money than a Roth would, but you do have to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan in order to contribute to an HSA. We have a ton more about HSAs in different videos. I'll link some of those below, and our key one I'll put up above. But check that out if you're interested in HSA. It could be a great way to save money too. The third reason not to convert everything to a Roth is you don't want to overpay for your conversions. So since you're watching a video about Roth accounts, you're probably very aware of the relationship between income and the decision to make a Roth or traditional contribution to an IRA or 401k. And what I'm saying is basically if you're in a low income tax bracket when you make a contribution relative to when you make a withdrawal, in other words, you're in a low tax bracket now, but when you retire, you'll be in a higher tax bracket you expect to be. You should make Roth contributions because the earnings grow completely tax-free. And when you make the withdrawal, it'll be a tax-free withdrawal, meaning you won't pay that higher income tax. On the other hand, if you're in a high income tax bracket now, you expect to be in a lower one later, you should contribute to traditional. That way you get the tax break now, but when you pay the tax in retirement, you're paying at a lower rate than you have now. And you may also know that if your income tax bracket is the same when you make the contribution and when you make the withdrawal, that it really doesn't matter. The outcome will be the same. If you're taxed at the beginning or the end, either way, you're going to end up with the same net amount. And that's almost true most of the time. Let's go through a quick example to illustrate this. Let's assume you have $1,000. You want to invest it and you expect a 5% return and you're in the 22% marginal tax bracket. Now, if you use a Roth account, you're only going to contribute $780 into the account because 22% of that $1,000 will be taxed going in. So you get $780 into the account. You earn $39 at a 5% return, leaving you with $819 total. Now, if you contribute $1,000 to a traditional IRA instead, you get the full $1,000 into the account. You earn 5% for the year, meaning you end with $1,050 before taxes. But then you're going to pay $231 in taxes because 22% of $1,050 is $231. And that's going to leave you with the same $819. The thing a lot of people forget is the United States has a progressive tax system. In other words, when you pay taxes, you start at a 10% rate. For the first, I think it's like $11,000 or so if you're single, about $22,000 if you're married. That first chunk of income, you pay 10% of your tax on it. The next chunk, you're going to pay 12% tax on to a certain amount, and then 22, and then 24, and then 32, 35, 37 on up. You can see on the column how that works. Well, if you're taking retirement distributions and you're not working anymore in retirement, odds are you're going to start taking those distributions from either a traditional or Roth account at the very bottom bracket, meaning 10%. So even if you expect in retirement to be in a higher tax bracket, 22, 24, 32%, the first dollars you pull out, if they're not earned income, they're going to come down at the bottom of that progressive tax ladder. In other words, even though you expect your marginal tax rate to be something in retirement, your income and your tax exposure begins at a different place than it does while you're working. Now granted, those bottom brackets are not terribly large, so it's not as if you'd miss out on a ton of tax savings if you still went this route or made a poor decision, but it's just suboptimal potentially. You also don't know what tax rates are going to be when you retire unless you're retiring pretty soon. Even in 2026, we don't know what tax rates are going to be. They're supposed to go back to 2017 rates unless Congress intervenes. We'll see how that goes. We're at pretty low tax rates historically at the moment, so who knows? We'll see how it goes. So 4 reasons you might not want to have everything in a Roth account. There may be more. I couldn't come up with them. Other than that, I think you're going to want money in a Roth account. Again, it's completely tax-free. I've never heard anyone regret having money in a Roth account and wish they had more in a taxable space. I tend to lean more toward Roth, all things being equal. That's really a decision for you. But there are times when Roth isn't the most optimal decision to make. Now, for more on Roth accounts, check out our playlist about Roths. It'll be at the end of this video. As always, we're thankful for your time and your interest in our videos. God bless and take care.